Let's talk about the best character in Yakuza 6, Hirose. Hirose is a small-time Yakuza boss who is immediately the best character in the game from the moment you meet him. He's got the most magnetism, and as he returns for bit parts and big parts, he remains the best character throughout. By now, you're probably thinking, oh, you mean he's your favorite character. You mean you think he's the best character. No, I mean the devs think he's the best character, and that's why we're here. If you don't think Hirose is the best character, then the devs have failed, because they went out of their way to try and make him the best character. They gave him the most space. They support him in every scene he's in with cinematography and writing to try and make him shine, even at the expense of other characters. They try very, very hard to make Hirose the best, and these are techniques that we can also learn from and use. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the techniques used to make Hirose the best character. And very few of them are about the actual plot. They're mostly about how he's portrayed on screen. So, spoilers incoming. Skip this if you don't like spoilers. And also, we do have to talk about why Hirose. Like, why did they choose this one old man to be the best character in the game? Why did they throw so much support behind this one guy? Well, you may have heard of a game called Cyberpunk 2077. It stars this lanky, greasy-haired dude that spouts pop philosophy. Now, the reason that game stars that guy is because he's a moderately famous American actor, and they thought it would sell more copies if his face was plastered in every scene that exists in the game. That didn't work out very well, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad idea. If you had a dev team that actually knew what they were doing and an actor that could actually act, that might work out, right? You could showcase a specific really good actor. Like, say, Beat Takeshi. Now, if you don't know who Beat Takeshi is, he's a famous Japanese actor, and he deserves to be famous. He is very good. He's also one of the few actors that can push his presence into a game. So many actors can't do that. They push, but it doesn't end up arriving, and they just feel forced. But Beat can do it, and he does. That's why this character's portrayal is so good. This is world-famous actor Beat Takeshi. And I don't mean that he's providing the voice. He is. But he's also providing the face and, I think, the mocap. So it's Beat. Like, he's just in this game. They gave him a spray tan and sat him down, and that is the extent of the video game-ness. This is just Beat Takeshi, and he delivers his lines like Beat Takeshi, and it works. And it's clear they knew it worked, because they put him in way more scenes than he should have been in, just relying on the fact that they had an A-lister who could actually act. So, we're going to go through and we're going to talk about the stuff that they do to back him up, but we do have to remain cognizant of the fact that we do have an A-lister that can actually act, portraying the character, which changes what you can do. As indie devs, we can't be like, oh, let's go hire an A-list actor for our indie dev game and then hook them up to a mocap suit while we record audio. It's like, that might be a little expensive. So most of our characters are not going to be A-listers. They're going to be, if we hire people at all, they're going to be just like pretty newbie type people. People just starting out, because that's the kind of budget we've got, right? And we may not hire anybody. We may just have like text boxes that pop up over someone's head and go beep, 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 beep. Those kind of deliveries don't have the nuance or the power that you can get from an A-list actor. So we do have to be aware of the fact that some of the techniques that are used here are going to have to be used with more care, because they depend on how well the portrayal works. Still, it's well worth investigating, well worth learning these techniques, so let's learn them. Let's learn the most basic technique first. The most basic technique to make a character stand out is to make sure they don't occupy the same emotional space as other characters. And in this case, it's right there in the title. Hirose is the casual patriarch. He is the only person in the game that's allowed to be casual. None of the other characters are casual at all. They all have skin in the game. They're all working for it. Hirose is casual. This allows him to be the only casual character. It allows him to occupy that space, occupy that headspace. That every time you think of him, that's what you're going to think of, and there's nobody else even close. That allows him to stand out. And casual is also a very powerful tool because it allows him to stay separate from the flow of the plot and the flow of the scenes. This is a very powerful tool. It's a very powerful way to make it work. But you know who else was casual, right? Jar Jar Binks. Yep. Misa, the casual character. Aren't I just the best? It's very easy to take it too far. Casual character, you can argue that maybe Jar Jar was zany or something, but the whole point here is you can take things too far. It's very easy to give someone a segment, an emotional block, and be like, take it away, and then they take it too far away. But you have to remain part of the world in order to influence the world. So what we're going to see here in this introduction, they're going to set him up as the casual character, but they're also going to make super, super clear that he exists in this world. He's not casual because he's off in La La Land. He's casual because he understands how things work, and they always work out fine. So let's take a look at the techniques they use on setting him up to be casual, and then the techniques they use to keep him from floating away into absurdity. We're just going to watch through it on its own first, and then we'll talk about specific techniques afterwards.
Oya-san, 失礼します。おう。また病院抜けてきたんですか。変ですかよ。
大丈夫だよ。医者もグルなんだから。俺ね、車で事故ったっつって保険金もらって入院してんの。本当は全然悪くないんだけどさ、寝てるだけで金入ってくんで。
兄貴、わしらの親父で広瀬ですわ。昔、陽明連合会と近江連合で勝ち合うた時は最前線で爆弾投げてたっちゅう人ですけ。の親さん。
もう昔の話だから。おい、南雲、もっと言えよバカ野郎。
いや、まあその前に客人をご紹介させてください。こちら東京からいらしてる桐生さんです。今後しばらくこの事務所にも出入りしますんでお見知りおきください。さあ兄貴。
桐生一馬です。お初にお目にかかります。
まあうちもヤクザだけど緩くやってるところだから、東京の極道から見たらあれだろうけど。
いえ、俺は仇で。
あれ？あ、そう。いや、俺はてっきりなあ。
いや、こちらの兄貴は極道顔負けの器量ですけん。おやっさんがそうおっしゃるのも無理ないですわ。
お、そうだ、南雲。お前上納金どうした？もううち金ないよな。上の筋からなんか言ってきてないの？
まあそっちはわしの方でうまくやっておりますけ。おやっさんは気になさらんで使わせ。
あ、そう。ならいいんだけどさ。
おい、ゆうた、頭おるか。頭、ちょっと見てきますけ。兄貴も。
ああ。
All right, let's go back through it beat by beat and talk about beat. So, obviously, we start with some establishing shots. Notice that the walls are kind of filthy. That's kind of the point. Here we are. So we immediately see that they are hitting us with blunt force casualness. They're saying, "This is the casual character!" And they're trying to make absolutely sure we know right away that this guy is super casual. He's sitting on his bed, he's surrounded by crap, and he's eating a parfait. You don't get much more casual than this. Oh, and of course I got the shuffling jazz track in the background. The jazz track is actually made for this scene specifically. I can tell because they put in the jazz highlights when the cuts happen, and it would be very challenging to do that if the song had been written for something else. So we're going to hear a specific example of that in just a second when we get our reaction shot. Hear that? That little change in the background music on the reaction shot is usually not coincidence, it's usually on purpose. That reaction shot was also important. It doubles down on the fact that this is the casual character by showing us reacting to the fact that it's the casual character. If you want to really hammer something home in a scene or a video game of any sort, just show a reaction shot. Reaction shots will always help the player to understand what sort of reaction they're supposed to be having. Even if the reaction shot is barely a raised eyebrow, we understand that that is quite a big reaction from Kazuma Kiryu. We also have this interesting line that's immediately going to start grounding this character in reality. Nagumo, the guy on the right, is saying, "Oh my gosh, are you out of the hospital? Are you sure you're supposed to be here?" And we're like, "Oh my gosh, what's going on? Is this guy dying of cancer or something?" Nagumo obviously cares about him a great deal. Is there something horribly wrong with him? He gives this slightly strange response, but this is also the first time we get a good close-up of his face. And I've said before that the first close-up is a very important close-up. It allows us to connect. But whatever emotions we've raised are what we invest. So in this case, we understand that this guy is casual. We hear the shuffling background music. We know that Nagumo really cares about him. And we know that he is super laid back, both in terms of, what he's sitting around in and how he talks. We are also allowed to kind of sit on this weird response. This beat happens at the perfect time to keep him from explaining himself. When he does explain himself, he explains that he's performing insurance fraud. He's the boss of the Yakuza family, and he's performing petty insurance fraud. That's how casual this guy is. Most bosses care about, respect and honor and authority. And he's like, I'm just going to run a petty little insurance scam. So you know exactly what he is all about. And to make sure that you realize that you're supposed to have noticed that, they give you another reaction shot from Kiryu. You hear a little His laughter is a very powerful tool. He's one of the only characters in this game that laughs. And because he's casual, his laugh is a diffusing tactic. It will make the scene lose a lot of direction, and that's on purpose, so that he can redirect it in the direction of his choosing. So here's the reaction shot I was talking about. Also notice that we have a lot of face acting from Hirose. His expressions are subtle, but they're very specific, and I believe that those are Beat Takeshi's actual expressions. I think they did face capture, because they're a little too subtle and idiosyncratic. If that was someone just inventing facial expressions for him, they did an excellent job. Inhabiting Beat Takeshi's face is important for Beat Takeshi, so having that kind of good acting really does matter, and in most games it would be underplayed, but this game is all about people that don't really show things on their face. Here we're going to learn how much Nagumo respects his boss. Oh, his boss used to be a badass. He's a great man. Take a look at this response that Hirose gives and realize that it's very careful. If he had been more casual about it, it might have felt like he was saying that, he'd never done these things. And if he was less casual about it, it might mean that he was too connected still, It had to be just the right amount of casual for you to realize that this guy used to be a firecracker. He used to be someone, and now he's like, I've seen it, whatever. I also like these two shots where we're talking to Hirose, but Hirose isn't in the two shot. Okay, this is a very powerful technique. Hirose, being a casual character, has one massive advantage. He can control the scenes from behind. he can take that casualness and he can turn it into an acting weapon. So what he's doing here is he's creating space. He's creating space with a very casual question or a very casual prompt, and he's allowing Nagumo to step forward to act in whatever way Nagumo feels is appropriate. Normally, when we write these kinds of sequences, there is this urge to write them tight. Like, Nagumo responds like this because he was prompted like this, or Nagumo responds like this, cutting off person 1. But that kind of really linear, pushy writing means that we never really get to feel too much about how the character responds on their own, like what the character actually wants. There's a lot of pressure on them to want whatever the scene demands of them. Hirose, being very casual, can use very soft language to open up acting spaces where the character comes forward and says something in character, and you realize that's what they've chosen to say. That's what the character thinks is important in this situation, in this context. And it allows you to learn a lot more about the characters than a command would have. This is something that comes up a lot in Japan. Specifically, they have this explicitly in their culture. They talk about it openly as soft commands. It's not so common in the West, but it's certainly a technique that allows these actors to act in a way that feels appropriate for their character rather than being forced.
もっと言えよバカ野郎。
いや、まあその前に客人をご紹介させてください。
Did you see it?
こちら
Don't worry, it'll come up
東京からい
again.
らしてる桐生さんです。
Once again, we're going to get a standard Kiryu shot here. Notice that he's just asking us to be nice. He's
さあ、
trying to connect his two heroes. We got our standard Kiryu shot, straight on, low angle.
お初にお目にかかります。
So I should mention that Nagumo is trying to connect his two heroes. To him, we're both heroes, but we've never met. So he's trying to introduce his two heroes and making sure they get along. He's not trying to, establish a pecking order or set up some kind of internal machination or whatever. He just wants his two buddies to get along.
まあうちもヤクザだけど。
You see that little sniff? That was good. So here he's about to do it again. He's about to once again open up a space for Kiryu to respond, the main character.
よくやってるところだから。東京の極道から見たら。
See how this question isn't actually a question? It allows us to do this. See that?
俺は
This is a very important character decision on Kiryu's part. Kiryu deciding to volunteer that he's not a Yakuza, he's a civilian, allows him to put stress on the fact that that is the choice he's made. He has decided that he's a civilian, even if that's a rough road. And you can see that in his eyes, in his delivery, and it's a thing that he came forward with. The boss didn't say, "Are you Yakuza?" The boss didn't say, "What's it like being a Tokyo Yakuza?" The boss didn't say any of that stuff. Hirose just opened up the space that allowed us to come forward with whatever we felt was the most important thing for us to say. I'm saying us, we are Kiryu, so you know what I mean. This technique allows these characters to step into that welcoming space and show what kind of character they are. It's a very basic technique, and I'm stressing it a lot because it's something that Hirose does a lot in the early game.
肩着て
あれ
Listen for the laugh. There we see. Diffusing the situation, changing the direction of the scene.
いや俺はてっきり。なあ。
いや、こちらの
Now
兄貴
here
が
we have
極道
Nagumo
顔負け
talking
の
us up
強
so that his boss knows that
お
we're
や
a
さんがそ
hero.
うしたのも無理ないですわ。
And that laugh, diffusing and
Oh, so
redirecting.
Nagumo.
See? So here, once again, he is going to create space for Nagumo. He's connecting to the world. He is a Yakuza boss. He has to sometimes talk about Yakuza things. But he doesn't demand to know what's going on. He doesn't demand answers or explanations. He opens it in such a way that Nagumo can respond however he wants. And how Nagumo chooses to respond defines a lot about Nagumo.
お前上納金どうした？もううち金ないよな。上の筋からなんか言って。
Notice how he asked some questions that are very directed, very pushy, and then immediately followed it up by asking a question that was like, did they push you around? Have they been mean to you because you completely failed to do your job? So even though he asks directed questions, he'll usually stop and redirect with a less directed question at the end, like this. It gives Nagumo a chance to, have an out if he wants one. This approach allows Nagumo to show that he really respects his boss. But more importantly, it allows Nagumo to express his connection to his boss in a way that works for Nagumo. Keep in mind that we have spent the past chapter cleaning up Nagumo's mess. This thing that the boss is asking about, Nagumo completely dropped the ball. Oh boy, did he screw up. And it has been a disaster. So when he responds like this,
生きてないの？
まあそっちはわしの方でうまくやっておりますけど
we know exactly what he thinks of his boss. He desperately wants his boss to not have to worry, and he's willing to take on responsibilities that he flat out can't handle.
さんは気になさらんで使わせ
あ、そう。
Listen for the laugh.
ならいいんだけどさ。
See? Defuse and redirect.
ちょっと見てきますけ
Listen to the music.
兄貴も
There you have it, the big introduction. Hopefully that was pretty clear. They made him the casual character, but they kept him connected to the story, and they were very careful to use his casualness as a weapon. That use of his casualness as a weapon continues in most of the scenes he's in. We'll show some other examples here. For example, in this. He's only in the first 15 or so seconds of this scene, but in those 15 or so seconds, he establishes the groundwork for the scene, he sets up the space for everyone else to act, he makes sure the tone of the scene is correct. We're going to watch through his chunk, and then we are going to stop and watch through it again with commentary, as usual. What I would pay attention to here is how he manages to make a very cramped, tense scene open and inviting and give people space to act.
Fukumen? なんか泥棒みたいだな。
ウヤスさん、なんで小川なもん持ってるの？
昔はこれかぶってムカつくやつを殴ってたもんだ。本家のやつとかバンバンな。全然バレなかったよ。
ほいじゃけど、そがなことする人、おやっさんの他に何人もおらんでしょうが。ほとんどバレとったんじゃ。
From there, the scene goes into some more tense negotiations about whether or not to use the masks. We're going to go back through that scene. Very short little scene. We're going to talk about some of the details, because there's a lot going on here that you may not have really picked up on. So the first detail is that this scene is a nightmare to shoot. Any scene where you've got a bunch of people in a tight space cluttered together like this is really challenging to shoot because the camera doesn't really fit. There have been a few spaces left to take camera shots in this scene, usually to Kiryu's left or Kiryu's right. But for the most part, this scene uses a lot of video game shots, first-person cameras that wouldn't work in a movie, but work fine in a video game. Watch on the left, he bends in, and we get a first-person shot of him. Because we cut on the action, we understand that this is a first-person shot of the guy who is bending in. He was in the center of the frame, he bent forward, the only person taking an action. Boom, we're him. This game has done a lot of this. We've gotten a lot of first-person shots similar to this. This is something that works fine in a video game. It would be a hard sell in a movie. So here is the sort of shot that we can get if we're doing like real cameras. You can see how crowded it is. We're looking past someone's elbow, past someone's hands, into this little teeny keyhole in the center of the frame. It's a very claustrophobic shot, and this scene would feel very claustrophobic and serious if all of the camera work had to be real, if we had to be like on the doing these shots or high shots from the ceiling. We do also have to talk about the masks. These masks are a visual motif. They come up a lot, and they are part of a gut punch later on in the movie. Or, sorry, in the game. Twists are something that many people don't get right. Most people seem to think that twists are when you prove how clever you are as a writer. That's not the case. Not to me. To me, a twist is when you recontextualize earlier scenes. When you use something that meant something earlier, and now it means something else because you've revealed something else. That doesn't necessarily even have to be a twist in a, quote, air quotes sense. It can just be a recontextualizing that ends up being a gut punch, which is what these masks end up being. Hirose plays it off very lighthearted, and you get the feeling that these masks are just an excuse. Like, oh yeah, he used to be a firecracker, so he happens to have some masks around, and we can use them to do the next part of the game because it requires us to do some stealth mission stuff. But in reality, the reason these masks are here is because there are some scenes very late in the game where Hirose is wearing masks, and it's a gut punch. That's the whole point of these masks. He has them because, yeah, he used them. They're his thing, and that's not as lighthearted as it sounds. This is something that's difficult to pull off, though, because if you put something like a mask situation like this in the game, people are naturally going to assume there's going to be a twist later. It's just a natural kind of thing to say, oh, where did this come from? There must be a twist. So you have to make it feel like it is a self-contained element. That's what they do with these masks. They introduce these masks in a very natural way, and therefore the next sequence as a minor little bit. It's not that important. And then the twist that we get early on is that Nagumo is completely worthless and completely ruins the entire operation by taking off his mask because he accidentally set foot, literally 1 foot, into a sauna. Ugh. And so, as the player, we're like, okay, so that's done. That's the masks thing solved. We got the masks introduction. We got the twist. That's the entirety of what we need. And we don't expect a punch later, a twist later. There's no big twist where they're like, the masks mean something incredible. There doesn't have to be. All there needs to be is a shot of Hirose wearing masks. And you're like, ooh, that makes those earlier scenes feel very different. That's the twist. The twist for me doesn't refer to, oh, the plot had a cool change. It refers to an earlier scene spinning. And that's why this scene is so important for me to show you, because I'm going to show you the rest of the masks setup as well. And we'll get to see how this visual trick, the cinematographers decided they wanted to use this visual, and it works very well. It's a repeated visual that ends up paying off. So this is a good trick. We got a two-shot between two characters that weren't active. The trick here is that the character that's currently speaking is the discard. Because he came up out of nowhere to say his line, he doesn't have any presence. But that's okay. He's not important. We're going to sacrifice him, push him back into the background. This is his last line. He exists solely to allow Hirose to come into the scene with some presence. So that's why Hirose is in this two-shot, because we get to see that he's addressing Hirose. He's bringing Hirose into the scene. He's establishing Hirose as an action, as an actor that has lines to say and things to do. And we get the reverse two-shot to pass it off, and then Mr. Yellow is gone. I mean, he's still there, but he never says anything. Here we are in Hirose's head, seeing all the reaction shots. This would have been very hard to do if we had a real camera, like floating above or something. Once again, reaction shots sell the situation, and notice that the music started up. Thought I heard the music start up. Maybe that's a different scene. Either way, here we see Hirose talking, and he's like playing it off. He's setting us up for the next bit. He's setting us up for the fact that we have to go somewhere wearing masks. And he's talking about his backstory where he was a firecracker, which is in the past, right? I mean, he was just some random Yakuza guy who, had a lot of fist fights when he was young. It's fine. He's cool. Okay, so here is where we get Nagumo responding. So, as usual, what he did was, with his casualness, he's opened up space for someone else to step in and act. Someone else to step in and reveal their character. And what comes past is Nagumo is stepping in to gently rib his boss for being too casual. Now, the reason this is great is because Nagumo is as dumb as a brick. So if Nagumo figured it out, well, you know.
おいじゃけど、そがなことする人、おやっさんの他に何人もおらんでしょうが。ほとんどバレとったんじゃ。
What I really loved about that was the face acting from the boss. Or I've just forgotten his name. I'm blanking on his name. The boss had a great facial expression during that exchange. Hirose. So, I want to talk about another scene that Hirose is in, this one. In this scene, we see more of the same. We're seeing Hirose doing some acting from behind. He sets the scene, he sets the framework, he makes sure there's space for people to act and that the tone is correct, and then he lets the scene move forward while he's still, gently nudging it from behind. In this case, literally. So let's take a look. We're not going to play through it on its own, we're going to talk about it. So we've just gotten back from a disaster. Like, this did not go well. And it's been this tremendous melodrama. It's like lots of really over-the-top soap opera bullshit. So coming into the scene means that the situation is quite heavy. And the player is probably thinking, this has been kind of silly. It's been heavy to the point that it's silly. So what do?
No.
They bring him in to do some voice acting. They bring him in to say some lines to lighten things up. He's the one that suggested the mask, and now he wants to know how it went.
それが南雲の頭が途中で熱いて脱いでしもて、せっかくの黒が水の泡じゃ。
なんだ南雲お前。
This is fantastic. He does not care about the mission that you went on. He does not give one flying fuck about this collection of Tokyo Yakuza that you went over to beat the shit out of. But he does care that Nagumo is feeling pretty rotten about it, that Nagumo made a mistake. And so he's like, hey, Nagumo, you sack up, come on. It's a manly man way of saying, you can do it. And he doesn't realize yet that Nagumo is not crestfallen because he screwed up. Nagumo is crestfallen because his crush was married to some Tokyo mobster.
根性ねえな。
キヨちゃんが。そんな。嘘じゃ。
So, what does he do? He gets personal. He's asking about personal things, but he's doing it in a way that opens up the space for everybody else to act, for the characters to be the characters, to choose what they're supposed to be doing.
こいつどうしたんだ。
They choose nothing. That's very powerful. Choosing nothing is still choosing.
よし。
So what's he doing? Diffusing. He's setting up the tone to make it lighter, to make it so that it's not overwhelmingly melodramatic. Keep your eyes on the background. See this? The background is critical in this scene. It keeps the tension from getting silly. Excuse me. If it gets too tense, it would be hard to take seriously anymore. So we've got people goofing off in the background to keep things lighter. Now, this. This is really important. Giving us a close-up of Hirose wearing this mask is critical, because he's going to be wearing it at the end of the game. And the devs knew that we would want to know what that looks like. We would want to have set that up ahead of time so that we're not confused when a dumpy old man in a mask shows up. We can say, oh, that's Hirose. We can tell right away. But it feels very natural, doesn't it? It feels very natural. He's goofing off with his boys, being a little too casual. And, the masks are good, aren't they? Boy, does that have a lot of meanings. It also gives another character an opportunity to act. They stay in the background for a while there. So you can see that they're setting up Hirose, and those aren't all of his scenes. He has several scenes where he plays, bit parts, and they're always quite good. He always controls the scene by creating spaces for the other actors to act. And he manages to do that not through his own willpower as Beat Takeshi. He does it because he's written to do it. They created those opportunities with him in mind, and his acting helps to sell them. But if they told him to say something that didn't do that, then it wouldn't have worked out. I wanted to hammer home just how much stuff they're putting in here. This groundwork is not simply, Beat Takeshi can act, so we're going to have him act. Almost every aspect of these is carefully chosen to allow for an emotional twist later using the same visual language and the same props. I think it's a very good setup. Let's take a look at one of his later, less friendly turns. Here we are. Spoilers incoming. Let's see what happens when it turns out that he is, in fact, a badass villain. So previously, Hirose has been occupying the casual space, right? He's the casual character. In a fun twist, he's also the only character allowed to be an unstoppable badass. There have been other characters in this game that feel badass, like for example the Yome captain, the red-jacketed captain, but we've beaten him down. He's not that much of a threat. He's obnoxious. He's dangerous, but he's not an unstoppable badass. Kiryu is the unstoppable badass, where at the height of Kiryu's fame, Kiryu is able to roll across these enemies without too much challenge. That is the nature of this game, but it also allows us an opportunity to have someone that feels like you can't roll them over, that feels untouchable. And that's exactly Hirose's other half. He is casual, but he's also the monster. And unusually for a Yakuza game, there's really no other characters that approach him on the, total monster scale. In fact, that's a major weakness of Yakuza 6. The end boss feels like a throwaway. But Hirose, I think he does pretty well at selling it. This particular cutscene does have one major problem. It's very confusing. You see, Hirose stole the baby. And we just spent the past couple of chapters trying to figure out where he took the baby. Then there's this cutscene of him holding the baby. So your thought is, oh, he must have just had this. This must have been why he stole the baby. But that doesn't line up with the things he's saying. And it turns out that this is actually like a month and a half ago. And it's like, what? That makes no sense. And that confusion really sabotages the flow of the scene for me. But with that in mind, let's see how Hirose does the opposite of what he's been doing so far. Some of the things he's been doing so far have been opening up spaces for other actors to act. But if you can open them up, you can also close them down. And so Hirose is going to use a lot of techniques here to shut down the other actor. So let's take a look at this with a focus on that. We're going to play through it once on its own. Maybe not, it's kind of long. We'll see.
Hirose さんだったか。
あんたもおじいちゃんなんだ。孫の顔を一目見たいだろうと思って連れてきてやったよ。
あなたの目的は私に孫を見せることじゃないだろう。尾道の秘密の件では。
話が早くていいね。本当はあんたを殺しちゃ手っ取り早くて済むんだけどな。でもうちのクルス会長はあんたらが日本を撤退すりゃそれでいいってさ。あの人も俺ももう血は見飽きてんだ。
我々採用会はすでにアジア外に莫大な投資を済ませている。だがその回収はまだ済んでない。
撤退する気はねえってことか。
そして何よりクルスの息子は我々の後継者であるジミー・ローを殺した。ビジネスとしても人の親としても、私にはあなた方の要求を聞く道理がない。
そう言うと思ってね、あんたにはいい条件持ってきたよ。
なんだ、その赤ん坊を目の前で殺すとでも言うのか。
宇佐美雄太をあんたにくれてやる。あいつには西洋会の後継者になるよう俺から説得してやる。それでどうだ？この条件で飲めねえっつうんなら雄太に全部話しちまうけどな。この赤ん坊があいつの子で、あんたがそれを始末しようとしてることも全部さ。そうならあいつはあんたの後継者には死んでもならない。あんたらの組織が一番大事にしている血のつながりが途絶えてしまうな。それでもいいかい？
その赤ん坊はどうする？
俺が面倒見させてもらうよ。永遠にこの子の存在は雄太から隠し通してやる。私
としてはここで赤ん坊もろともあなたの口を封じるという手もあ
る。やってみるかい。その時は真っ先にあんたが死ぬよ。それにして下とも同じ10人か道連れにさせてもらうわ。
それは大げさだ。そばに控えている部下たちは全員銃を持っている。
俺にできねえと思うか？
クルスのもとにまだあなたのような男がいたとはな。
俺の隠れ家の周りでうろついてるあんたの手下な、達川と松添、すぐ引き上げさせろよ。それと西洋会のカムロ町撤退には一月だけ時間やる。尾道の秘密はさ、あれ守るために俺何人もぶっ殺してきたんだ。そんな中には俺を可愛がってくれた兄貴分もいてね。もしあんたに秘密ばらされたら兄貴たちが浮かばれねえんだよ。
傍から見れば不思議に見えただろう。私は100人を超える部下に守られながら、たった一人の老人を相手にその要求を丸飲みさせられた。
I did let it play through on its own. I like that scene, but there are some issues with it. One of the things worth noting is how much heavy lifting the music did in that scene. If you didn't notice, just go back and listen to it again. The music comes in to tell you what's going on at every beat. Beat Takeshi is asked to do a lot. He is asked to deliver these lines that make his character feel like he's such a badass that he can be casual about it. I'm not sure it works 100%. You'll have to tell me whether or not you felt that Hirose could actually pull off the things that he's threatening to do. But I hope that you noticed the way that Hirose just casually shut down the Yakuza boss, or the Mafia boss's acting. He was like, the Mafia boss was coming in to say his part, and then Hirose's like, I don't give a shit. You're not going to do it? I'll kill you. I'll kill your guys. They're armed, you know. I don't care. They'll die. That shutting down creates a tremendous amount of pressure. That sort of exchange is fairly easy to write, and it's fairly hard to screw up. So I recommend that you try it if you've never tried it before. Now, the problem here is that it's a little bit hard to believe that Hirose is as capable as he's made out to be here, because we have never seen any signs of that, as far as we know. Turns out that it's not that big a stretch for him, and they quickly sell it later on in the game, but I'm not sure how well it works for this one scene. I felt it was a little thin because it wasn't prepped for quite as well as it could have been, but that may have been because I was thinking this scene happened like yesterday when it happened a month and a half ago. So it's a little bit, you know, it's one of those things where it's hard to tell how much of my disinvestment was because of things outside of the scene. It's all about the lead up. Anyway, we now have seen Hirose's other half. Let's talk about some of the other things that he does. We can talk about some mask stuff. Here, for example, we have this scene, which we won't go through on its own. I'm going to talk as it happens. This predates the rise of the secret of Onomichi from the seas, and this is us. We're seeing some groundwork being laid for the cinematography in the rise of the secret of Onomichi. A lot of spiral snap zooms. And the absolute silence in these scenes is one of the things that helps to build them. You probably can't tell because I'm talking, but there's no background sound. That creates a hollow that feels bigger and bigger and bigger the longer it goes on, until you're sure something awful is going to happen. Oh, look. So we have now... Oop, let's pause a little over there. So we already know who this is because we've seen him wearing a mask before. Now, I don't know how threatening this feels because it doesn't really feel like that swing against us earlier was terribly dangerous. It felt pretty clunky. I'm not sure if that was on purpose or not. The battle that actually unfolds here is basically a Tonberry battle. It's quite fun. It's always fun to see someone who shouldn't be a threat performing in combat. They have all sorts of fun animations. But this really does help to sell that he is a real threat, because he can take you on. Now, at this point, the scene is starting to feel smothering. It's gotten too tight. The combination of the close-ups, the silence, and the stifling tunnel vision that we have going here makes this scene feel too smothering. So that's why they cut away to these two randos. And these people are going to make sure that we understand that the scene is part of a larger situation. There are other people around. There are other people involved. We're here for a reason, and the reason is these people. It helps to loosen the scene up a little bit. It breaks away some of the calcite. I don't know why I want to say that. The clutter, the plaque that's been gathering in the scene. Now watch, we're going to see some shutdown. As I said, you can shut down the other actor. In this case, he shuts down the other actor by simply denying the other actor exists. We're not part of his posse. We're not part of his family. He does not give the slightest shit about us one way or the other. We are a total non-entity to him. Now he's going to realize that things are starting to really fall apart, and we're going to see his face change. this stillness is really good. It's just a tiny smidge different than his normal expression, and it's enough to speak volumes. Hear the music swell now? No more silence. Once again, he's shutting down now instead of opening up. He's demanding that we respond in a very specific way, rather than giving us the opportunity to act. And when we decide to act, when we decide to act anyway, what does he do?
その前にあんたは広瀬一家の門に説明しなきゃならないことが山ほどあるはずだ。
なあ、どいてくれよ。
It's good, right?
頼むよ。
The lighting is also really good in this scene.
広瀬!
Finally, he breaks a little bit.
俺を倒していくんだな。
It's good. It's good. I like it. One more, okay? Just one more for the road here. These are all scenes where Hirose goes over his backstory. In this scene, at the very beginning, we're just going to look at the first couple of seconds here. We've just defeated Hirose in the fight, and he's lying on the ground. And his big response to the secret being revealed is to simply close his eyes.
兄貴、おやさん。
Watch.
なんじゃ。
俺の負けだな。
It's pretty good. I like it. And the reason I brought that up is because in his final scene, he starts there. We're going to see Hirose's final breath. Spoilers, he dies. Unfortunately, for some reason, there's more game after that. I'm not sure why. Hirose is the only character that really matters. Resolving things with, you know, the Yome Alliance captain and his son is completely unimportant. But we are going to see Hirose's final breath. I think we're going to let it play through on its own once and then go through it again. I wanted to establish that it starts, even though there are 3 cutscenes between this one and this one, it starts at the end where we just paused this one. And that is funny because we get to see a lot of his backstory kind of on his own, right? And we're going to skip all that. We're going to skip his backstory. We're going to skip all of the story beats and all of the stuff like that because none of it actually matters for what we're trying to talk about, which is the cinematography. So let's talk about Hirose's final breath instead. I'm going to try and let it play on its own.
ビビったけどさ、不思議な気分だったよ。あそこまでされたらさ、もう秘密の中身なんて二度と聞く気も起きなかった。
でもその秘密を守るためあんたが何人も殺す羽目に。
都政の義理ってやつさ。嘘だよ。親父に頭下げられた瞬間にさ、親父のため、広島のため、日本のため、そのためにこんな自分でもなんか役に立つんじゃないかって本気でそんなこと思っちまったんだ。バカ怖いよな。でもあんたならわかるだろう。わかんねえか。
広瀬は私の命令を忠実に完璧にやり遂げた。自分が兄貴と呼んできた陽明連合会の幹部を何人もその手にかけてな。 この道の秘密は私の部下仲間だった者たちの屍に守られてきた。桐生さん、あんたがたった今暴いたのはそういう秘密なのだ。故にその行為は万死に値する。
おやっさん、
南雲、
何をする気じゃおやっさん。
やれ広瀬。この場にいる者は全員道連れになってもらう。そいつもまとめてやってしまえ。
おやっさん、もうやめてくれや。
何をしている広瀬。
ダメなんですよ親父。こいつは南雲は。
おやっさん、
そうだ、お前頭悪いから尾道の秘密が何なのかよく分かってないよな。だからそこどけな。親父、こいつだけは勘弁してやって。
今さら日和よって
おやっさん。
広瀬、お前にはもう一つ言ってなかったことがある。かつて大東寺が私に命じたのはな、実を言えば戦艦の破壊だった。その代わりに秘密を知る同胞の皆殺しを提案したのは私だ。
なんだと。
戦艦が跡形もなくなれば私は大東寺に対して切り札を失うのでな。
待てや。
ほっとけ。あの人ももう終わりだ。すげえなあれ。俺もさ、尾道の秘密ってのは何なのか本当言うとずっと知りたかったんだよな。ありがとうなあんちゃん。
親分、
南雲、
なんじゃ
松永、
おやっさん。
本当はお前らに殺されてやりたかったんだけどな。
どういうことじゃ。
お前らの父親は俺の兄貴分だった。
分かっております。じゃけえおやっさんはわしらの面倒を。
そうじゃねえ。兄貴たちも尾道の秘密を知る生き残りだったんだ。だからよ、
さかおやっさんがわしらの父親を。
ごめん。
Pretty good? Let's go over it and ruin it with analysis. Yeah, I know this episode is already an hour long. Geez, you have no idea how many takes it took, too. So, this is, as I said, after a lot of flashbacks. He's told us all about his history. We got to see a young version of Beat Takeshi. And he's talking about the day when his boss told him to start murdering all of his buddies.
でもその秘密を守るためあんたが何人も殺す羽目に。
都政の義理ってやつさ。
This next line. Notice the laugh that allows him to diffuse and redirect, still in play here.
親父に頭下げられた瞬間にさ、親父のため、広島のため、日本のため。
The music is doing a lot of pushing here. They really work the music in this scene. It's never overwrought, but it's always extremely on point. They are very aggressive about making sure the music backs up the current tone completely.
そのためにこんな自分でもなんか役に立つんじゃないかって本気でそんなこと思っちまったんだ。
Oh, by the way, this guy is the head of the Yome Alliance, his boss, the person who made him murder a whole bunch of people. We don't actually get to do anything with him. He just shows up in some cutscenes and then vanishes. This line is awesome. Right here.
でもあんたならわかるだろう。わかんねえか。
That is an amazing line with an amazing delivery. That feels like it might have come out of the actor. It might have been an ad-lib. That's, if not, that is a spectacular case of writing something that you knew would require a really high-grade actor to deliver and trusting the actor to be able to deliver it. That is really good. I like that. Oh, that's good.
広瀬は私の命令を忠実に完璧にやり遂げた。
This is clearly the end of the line for both of them. They both know it. So they're clearing out the air.
自分が兄貴と呼んできた陽明連合会の幹部を何人もその手にかけてな。尾道の秘密は
That shot of us in the background blurry was more important than you might think. The fact that we go from looking at the Yome Alliance captain to looking back at Hirose is a really powerful statement of how the scene is shifting, and even though it was blurry and in the background, it's actually the point of those shots.
私の部下仲間だった者た
It's
ち
us realizing that Hirose is pretty bad. He is a villain.
さんあんたがた
Nobody is looking at the boss of the Yome Alliance. We are all looking at Hirose. That is a really good way to make the intent of this scene clear. The boss of the Yome Alliance is talking. He's saying important things, and none of us give the slightest shit about him because Hirose is the point of the scene.
った今暴
But
いたのは
he's still
そう
Hirose's
いう
boss.
秘密なのだ。
Now this, by revealing the secret, you have rendered their lives meaningless. You should remember that that has come up before. In the previous bit where he had the baby and was talking to the Chinese mafia boss, that's how he left the scene. He was like, if you reveal the secret of the Yome Alliance, of Onomichi, it will make those deaths meaningless. And that was like the open threat against the Chinese mafia boss. Didn't turn out to be necessary because the Chinese mafia boss didn't know the secret, but it's the exact same line now being delivered by his boss. Clearly they share this focus, this idea that their dead friends can only have their memories can only be preserved by keeping the secret. And we've just stepped on that.
故にその行為は万死に値する。
Listen. Did you hear that music? Oh, yeah, that's good. With that shot on Hirose, the music coming in, Hirose delivers no line there. You just hear his mind realizing what has to happen and shifting back into business mode. And the music is his mind doing that. It works really well. To me, I think so. Now here we have the point. This is literally the point of his whole arc. His boys, his Yakuza family are in the way. Nagumo has to choose which of his heroes is, the one he's going to support. And right now, he can clearly see, right from wrong. He's choosing to support Kiryu against a murderer, even though he loves them both. In fact, he definitely loves Hirose way more than he loves us, but he can still tell right from wrong. This next bit is, no joke, my favorite thing in this entire game. This next part.
この場にいる者は全員道連れになってもらう。そいつもまとめてやってしまえ。おやさん、もうやめてくれや。
Hear the music?
何をしている？広瀬。
There it is. That. Here. This too.
ダメなんですよ、親父。
Oh, that is awesome to me. I love that part. I don't know how many people are going to agree, but to me, that is the best moment in the game. The moment when the killer of the past is lost. It has vanished in a puff of smoke, and all that's left is the father, the person he has become, the casual patriarch. And he releases all of that tension with a line that's delivered really, really well. It's like, it feels like it's, normally you think about these things being epic, right? Oh, you gotta have the epic final fight where you jump on the dragon's back and scream, but here, the epic final moment is him going, no. And I think that is one of the best pieces of writing in Yakuza 6. I just love how that feels. That moment when this guy, who we know is not like a mastermind, he's not a brainiac, when he finally just realizes that the past needs to be forgotten because he's got a family. He's got people he loves. So he's currently talking to his boss, but he's going to stop talking to his boss and talk to Nagumo because he knows his boss is not going to give him permission to not kill Nagumo. But if he can make it a fait accompli. The only problem I have with this scene is that his face acting isn't quite as much as I'd like in this. And that's because it's not a tight close-up. He's kind of in the distance, so I think he could have pushed the face just a little bit more, but that's okay. Now this part is awesome. I love this ending. This is amazing, and it should have been the ending of the game. Hirose has come to the realization that he can't kill his children. He can't do the things he spent his life doing because things are different now. He's become a different person, and he's got kids, and he loves them, they're important to him, and he wants to spend time with them and all that jazz. And when it becomes clear that this is the end for both of them. It's obviously the end for both of them. But when it becomes clear that his boss is unraveling and he's unraveling and everything's falling apart, what does his boss do? His boss shoots Hirose, the only person in the scene that was on his side. Because he understands everything's falling apart. He understands that there's no point to any of this. And the only thing left for him to do is to rage against the one thing he understands, the one thing he can control, the one thing that's still managing to slip out of his grip even now in the last moments. He should have had that one person on his side, but no, then I can't let you have, and then I can't let anybody have you. He shoots the one person who's on his side. And I was kind of rambling there, but I hope you get the point. This is a really powerful statement where we see the death of Hirose at the hands of his boss because his boss lost and can't cope. His boss fell apart in the last moments. This is the defeat of his boss. Music once again coming in. And then this part here, also incredibly good. Oh, that's good. Oh, this is why I play Yakuza games.
Hirose, お前にはもう一つ言ってなかったことがある。
I don't really have anything to say about this part. I mean, it's important, I guess. It just feels a little bit slow. A little bit. I mean, I understand. The whole point here is that he's revealing, you know, it's his last moments and he's revealing the biggest secrets and all that jazz. It feels a little too slow for me. I don't know why. Music doesn't think so, though.
戦艦が跡形もなくなれば、私は大道寺に対して切り札を失うのでな。
You pretty much could have watched the whole Let's Play of this game in the time it's taken you to watch this video. This is great. Hirose understands that both of them are gone. This was their final moment. Now, one thing we skipped over, there are parts of his backstory where he's told that he'll never know the secret of Onomichi. He's told that he will spend his life protecting the secret of Onomichi and will die without knowing it. So here he is, dying while looking at it. And that's a nice callback, that's poignant. The music comes in. Keep an eye on our reaction shots here. This is one of the few times in the game where we're allowed to emote, but since it's not about us, we have to emote very, very carefully. If we accidentally make this scene about us, it's going to be detracting from the overall scene. The music again. This is a really good reveal as well. You've already seen it, so you know what the reveal is. But this is a very emotional beat. He's felt enormous guilt over the fact that he's been a mass murdering psychopath the entire time. He did this out of loyalty to his boss and an effort to make something of himself. And he's been trying to make amends for it, but he's never really felt like he has gotten anywhere near it. Close up on the knife. Blunt force cinematography. Ah, there it is. This is the moment when you get that little twist. Oh, the masks, of course. Of course the masks. And then here we've got this really aggressive beat where both the music and the shot are saying very loudly what's going on here. Look, it's a model of the Yamato covered in blood. This is the moment where you realize that the masks are like much darker than you thought. They mean a lot more than you thought. And if you think that the model of the Yamato and the blood and all that stuff is over the top, that's fine. You can be over the top. There's nothing illegal about it.
まさかおやっさんがわしらの父親を
By the way, they spend the rest of the game talking out how they feel about, the fact that they love this guy, but he also killed their dads. Did you see our reaction shot there? We went... Our reaction can be restrained because someone else is going to have the big one. We're not going to derail it. Alright, so I kind of made an hour-and-a-half long video without meaning to, and you have no idea how many takes it took. But I wanted to talk about the techniques used here. There's a lot of techniques to open and close space, a lot of techniques to create a dedicated emotional environment, and a lot of techniques to lay the groundwork for later reveals. These are things that I think that you can use. These are techniques that everybody can use, and I'm hoping that I'll see more of them in the future. I doubt anybody will want to learn them from an hour-and-a-half long video about one old man in Yakuza 6, but I thought it was worth talking about, so now I've talked about it. Have a good one. Whatever's left of your day. Bye.